everyone, I'm Siri Vincent Pluff.
And I'm Cassandra Snow.
And you are listening to Chaos and Cunning,
a DIY witchcraft podcast at the crossroads of magic and daily living.
Cassandra.
Siri.
Is it time?
Yes, it is time.
So, we are starting a Patreon for the podcast, and it's really exciting. We'll have bonus episodes and mini arcs about stuff that we don't cover on the main podcast.
After this episode, we're actually taking a short break from the podcast proper, but we will be on Patreon with a mini arc of the podcast that's going to be all about Minnesota folklore and heavy on the cryptids at the request of yours truly.
I am so excited because
I am really excited too.
I love like weird little local shit, and I feel like Minnesota cryptids and stuff don't get as much love as they should.
They don't. And a lot of people don't know about a lot of them, even people from here. So I'm really excited to talk about it.
Yeah. So if that sounds interesting to you at all, you can access it for just $5 a month.
If you're in a really good spot and you love us a lot, there is going to be a $25 donor tier. At this point, you don't get any extra content for it, but if you just are really feeling generous, you really want to make sure Siri and I are able to support ourselves in the podcast, you have our undying thanks. We will thank you on air if you want. That's an optional opt-in.
Perfect. Yes. So check out our Patreon at the link in our description.
And now back to the show. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to our 5th episode. Today we are talking about protection magic.
So we're going to kick it off like we always do with our Divination Corner. So a caveat for the Divination Corner, we are both professional readers with 20 plus years of experience each. And what we do here at Chaos and Cunning is not really like forecasting or doing any kind of prediction work for the listener. Instead, we give you some ideas or prompts to chew on and to create with. And this is also a way that you can think about how you want to work with your own divination tools.
So I am going to start today. I am using the Tangled Roots Oracle, which is a hyper-local oracle deck. My friend Lior made this. They are great. And this was a small run. They just sold it at like events and arts fairs and stuff like that. Which I don't even think they're doing a lot anymore. And so that's what we got. And I am pulling the card now. I got Balance. So one thing, if you don't know how to read an oracle deck, you might as well learn now. Always, if there is a guidebook or whatever, make sure, you read through what the deck creator intended, all of that. Lior's deck just comes with like a keyword sheet. So some of them, a lot of oracle decks are just vibes. And I think that's why they make a lot of diehard like tarotists like uncomfortable, because there's not like a system. But I feel like my handle on my personal understanding of symbolism and stuff is clear enough that I still really love working with oracle decks. And so that's sort of all that's required is, do you know what things mean to you? And are you willing to do a little research if not? So all of that to say, that's how you do that. So one thing I do, I read the word on it, I look at the image, and then I also, if it has numbers, do the numerology. So this is 17 in tarot. That would be the star. The card is Balance. And then it's also an 8. So it's like connected to the strength in the tarot as well as the other 8s, all of that. So in terms of prompts, whether it's for your writing, your journaling, conversations with other people, or just something to contemplate, Balance in this one, the image, it's like kind of the rock displays people put together at the beach. There's like the big rock and then a flat rock, and then they sort of have made scales out of that. And there's one big rock and then 3 smaller rocks, and it's evened out. And so all of that to say, when we're talking about balance, I think a lot of people think that balance is doing, let's say, 10% of your energy on 10 different things every day, for example. And I'm not saying that's how the exact numbers are, but everyone thinks it's like doing the same things in the same, or doing different things in the same increments of time, energy, etc. What this card reminds me of is that that's not actually true. There are definitely going to be times in your life where there's going to be a bigger rock sitting on one side. So you need smaller rocks on the other side to have balance. So for me right now, that means a lot of my days are just the big rock is parenting, or the big rock is writing deadlines, or the big rock is, oh, I agreed to do 25 tarot readings in 2 days. So now I have to do the big rock of 25 tarot readings in 2 days. And so then the smaller rocks are like self care, other work, moving my body. It's not all going to have equal time and energy. So your prompt then is, what is the big rock in your life today? And I specifically am highlighting today because I think this is a good regular check-in for yourself. And because again, that's the whole point of the card, is it's not going to be the same every day. And so asking yourself, like, what is the big rock today? And what are the smaller rocks that can still balance that out? And so then when we're talking about what balances that out, it's also things that keep you strong and balance you so that you can see to the big rock, or so that the big rock can have as much weight as it does. So the second part of that one is like, what are the things that stabilize you and allow you to devote a lot of energy to the things that need a lot of energy? So those are the prompts. What is the big rock? And then what are your small rocks balancing and feeding that?
All right. Thank you so much for that. And I'm back to using runes because they are like, I work with them for protection all the time, so it felt apropos. All right, and for this one, we get Dagas, which is also, funnily enough, a rune that can be used and talked about in terms of balance.
I knew
Um,
that was going to happen. As soon as you started shaking, I was like, it's going to be a balance rune.
yeah, so that's really funny. Dagas is an interesting kind of balance, though. It's a little bit different. It's kind of about like taking your extremes and balancing them into the middle. So, like, knowing that you have extremes and then, like, figuring out a good middle ground, or that the extreme will pass, is
Mm.
one way that I like to think about it, right? Another thing that it is all about is that Dagas is also related to day, which is often associated with things like success or abundance. But I like Dagas doesn't feel that way to me in the same way as like some other runes do. So it's more to me like the relief of a new day. Um, I used to think of, so there's a big debate in rune circles over whether Dagas or Yera is meant to be at the winter or the summer solstice,
Mm.
right? So a lot of people say that Dagas should be in the summer solstice because of its association with day, whereas Yera should be at the winter solstice because that is the turning of the year and also, like the actual harvest of all of the abundance. Um, but I actually, when I was learning runes, I thought of them in the opposite way. So I thought of Yera at the summer solstice as setting yourself up for success in the future by harnessing the power of the sunlight during the summer solstice. And then Dagas as like the first light after the darkest night. So it's like that relief that like the winter solstice has passed almost. And you can think about them in either way. Like the runes are like a circle, right? So like it's always turning, like you're not necessarily like fixed into one way of looking at them. And so when I think about Dagas with balance, I think about that. I think about the cycles. I think about how both Dagas and Yura are kind of like they're like sister runes in a way. I think of them as like being different ends of a cycle, or they are constantly showing us about the different cycles of life. So yeah, like that's really funny that was I was fully assuming I was going to get like a protection rune because that would be,
Mhm.
this episode in a nutshell, but
Mhm.
I didn't. I got a balance rune, which also I think okay, now that I'm holding Daga, now that I'm like literally holding the rune and waving it
Mhm.
around, I do think that balance is also a protective act because if you understand your levels and balance, and where you are perhaps imbalanced, then that can protect you from a lot. And I'm thinking particularly about like making bad decisions, right? So like knowing your limits can help you to not make poor decisions, or it can, help you to not lash out at others in a way that they might come and attack you in the future. Um, and it also like helps you have a greater grasp and sense of when something is off if you have a handle on your own balance. So that is also a way that I would think about this concept in terms of protection magic.
Absolutely. And I think that to speak to mine too, the balance is also like you are consistently protecting yourself from burnout by wanting all the rocks to be big rocks or making the big rock a small rock when sometimes there are things in our life that you have to see to harder or it screws you over more later. So yeah. And as we get into it, so we like to always answer because we know we have all levels of witches listening and magical practitioners. So what is protection magic? This one is relatively straightforward. It is literally, it's a really broad area. It literally is just magic to protect someone, something, yourself, your community, your car is one I do a lot, things like that. So that's literally all it is. And so today, what we're really emphasizing is like daily protective magic. Um, and then sort of the bigger, like occasionally a fallout thing does happen and you need bigger magic. And then we're focusing on spirit, like protection against like things going awry spiritually for you, as well as mundane protection from the world at large. So those are just sort of the two areas we're focusing on. I also always want to give a lot of caveats when we're talking about spiritual protection, or sorry, when we're talking about protection magic in general, because there are a lot of places in the world it is not safe right now, and a spell is not going to be the only thing that saves you. It's not like a savior situation. I think we have to also always remember that other people are using their free will and their magical power really, really forcefully and aggressively and in large numbers and with a lot more power and money than most of us have. And I would argue that anyone listening to this podcast like does not have that much money and power. If I'm wrong
Yeah.
and you want to sponsor the show, hit me up. But um, so nothing we say today is meant to be like 100%. And I wish that we could guarantee results with anything. But A, that's not how witchcraft works because a lot of it is going to be different for you because you're a different person than us. But there are even states where Siri and I would be less safe than we are in Minnesota right now. And so that's a lot of why we could talk forever about the importance of protecting community and marginalized folks. And that work is so important, but it really deserves its own episode later on. Today we're kind of focusing on the personal, I think. And so we might bring up collective examples, and so when we talk about personal protection, it's like protection from a car wreck, protection from someone breaking into your house, protection from someone just like being mean and trying to sink your battleship. That was a weird metaphor, but like um someone trying to sink your battleship just cuz they're jealous or they don't like you or they are just in a pissy mood and you cross them at the wrong time. So those are the things we're focusing on today. This is only an hour long or so podcast and so we're keeping it as narrow as we can. That was a
We will
lot of me
definitely
yapping.
No, it's totally okay. We will definitely be talking about a lot of different forms of protection throughout the course of this podcast. It is something that I feel very strongly about. It is one of the first kinds of magic that I teach my students when I'm teaching witchcraft classes, because I feel like it's applicable everywhere and in a lot of cases. I also am going to say that like I'm going to be talking a lot more about my cunning work. As a part of this episode, I get a lot of my inspiration for protection magic, specifically from folk customs, folk magic, that kind of thing. And so I'm excited to kind of like dive into that side of my practice, I guess, because the last episode was much more on the chaos side for me, at least. Um, yeah, so spiritual protection, when we are talking about spiritual protection, we are talking about Um, like protection on a spirit level, either from, like a hex, a curse, catching strays, entities that may be following you, or that are, not allies, let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
um Whether or not they are actively working against you is one thing, but like you also just don't want to have like a ton of entities attached to you that are not your allies. um and yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm having a hard time because like I know that we're not really talking about diagnosing the needs for
Mhm.
protection in this podcast episode, which is something that I am trained in and that I do for people. um but basically, like, if you feel like something is off and you can't put your finger on like a mundane like reason why it is off, or let's be real, living in America right now feels like being slowly boiled alive. But if it feels like suddenly like, oh, this is imminent, right? Like there's an imminent threat, but it's not tangible. Like that is what we're kind of referring to when we're talking about spiritual protection. We're also talking about, protection from just like general malcontent, malaise, that kind of thing. The ick.
Yes. So when we are talking about spiritual protection, this is where Siri and I's practices are very different, and mine leans, I would say, literally right at the crossroads of cunning and chaos, which is what we aim for with the podcast, as well as the intersection of magic and daily living. But um,
Way
so
to work those
my
taglines in.
thanks, I do my best. I wrote them. I'm gonna use them.
Hashtag
So
branding.
hire me. So yeah, my protective work against sort of spiritual things as well as my own, let's say my own bad habits, tends to be sort of smaller daily rituals. So when I do my morning magic especially, and then when I do, usually I like say a sort of evangelical habit I never got out of was doing prayers before bed. It's just that they're two very different people, and sometimes even Satan now. So um and so usually it's like my prayers before bed, and then in my night magic I light a lot of candles, and there's something protective in there. Even in a money spell, I'm very explicit, like, please protect the money I have, and protect my ability to make money, which is another sort of good way to think about that. But uh that's not the main part of that, which is why I sort of supplement with the nighttime prayers. The morning is where I do a lot of my grounding. We have a friend in the cities, Siri and I have a mutual friend named Sarah, who has talked to me before about how like grounding, like connecting to the ground, but also like powering up, like from Cathania or whatever you believe in, and then powering down, like essentially pulling those protection of like the sun and the planets down. And so sort of like powering up and powering down, that's a weird sort of turn of phrase, but that's essentially what you're doing. Um and so this is something I do most mornings. Again, anyone can do this. It is purely like kinesthetic or whatever it's called. Like you don't need any tools. You just sort of invoke the protective energy of Earth itself as well as the planets. Um and this is what I do again, for spiritual protection, which is what we're talking about in this segment. So things like unwanted spirit visitations, and unwanted doesn't always mean negative or bad. Sometimes it means like, hey, this is a writing block. I cannot talk to you right now, grandma. I love you, but and so it's also like keeping things in a space and time that is convenient for you. And so it's, and then of course unwanted spirit interactions, as well as sort of unwanted interactions with others that would harm you spiritually. So things like people giving you the evil eye intentionally or unintentionally, or even just we've all had those experiences where we're at Costco and some cashier comes and makes you feel like a crook because there's too many items in your cart, and she has to make absolutely sure that she counted them all and you're not stealing from Costco. That's not a personal experience, don't worry. And so, but it's like, and like things like that that sort of sink into your skin and make you think bad thoughts about yourself or the world at large or the spirit world. um that's sort of the daily protective magic. Other things that I use before we segue into Siri's, sort of, because Siri's more the expert on this area of magic than me. But other sort of daily things that I do are like, I have a few protective stones that I really like. Some of them are ones I got from witch stores that said they were protective, but some of them are very personal. Some of them are like a piece of a brick I picked up during Pride. Like that is sort of one. And that has sort of like multi layers of meaning in it because of that. Um, but if we're talking spirit, that's more mundane. But if we're talking spiritual protection too, then like there's some that come from, say, like Superior or somewhere like that, or the Mississippi River, that I have like really, really solid relationships with those spirits. And so they sort of like sent me protective stones or whatever. And so stones are one way, and having relationships with the natural world so that you do sometimes see gifts like that being thrust into you. Uh, I love the Fae. I love working with the Fae. They possess a number of iron products in case things go awry that I can prop up in my house to sort of be like, no, no, not right now. We were not collaborating successfully. So let's not right now. So, yeah, I don't know. That's some of the stuff I do daily. And then, of course, I have my incantations. I had mentioned that I do a lot to keep my car safe. I have a protective oil that I'll rub on it sometimes. And then usually it's just a lot of incantations before I get in the car. I have a really big fear of driving and even just being in the car. And having an incantation that is like, and I love my car, but like having an incantation that is like, um, this car gets me from A to B and no problems come to it or me, or something like that, is one that I use a lot.
That was really
And again,
sweet. That's a
thank
really
you.
sweet little rhyme. I love that.
Thank you. If anything happened to Chloe, I would cry for 17 years. And so,
Chloe is their car.
yes,
For those who are listening.
yeah. So, yeah, that's sort of where I'm at and what I'm doing. But again, I mostly wanted to get my sort of daily stuff out of the way for people who are just starting off or not sure where to go, because I'm really excited to really kind of sit back and learn from Siri for a few minutes.
Oh, well, that this is so funny because like I don't feel like I'm an expert. I've just like seen shit. Like I've just had
Is
experiences where I've had to do more protective magic specifically.
But isn't that the first step of being an expert in anything, is seeing some shit?
I suppose, yeah. Yeah. Um, so to name some like allies specifically that we both work with for protection, I know that you had mentioned crystals. I am not a huge crystal witch, but for protection specifically, I do find that crystals are helpful. So what are some crystals that you use or some stone allies other than the beautiful, wonderful, just like natural rocks?
Yeah. I do have a tourmaline that I really love. I actually will carry coal sometimes, especially living in Minnesota. Because coal, I also think, and by carry coal, obviously, like you'll get it everywhere, but like put it in something. But I and don't eat it. I feel like that needs to be said. Don't put rocks in you. Um, and
Yeah, do your research before you eat
yeah,
rocks
I
or
mean,
lick them.
or do anything else that would put them inside of you. Yeah, so tourmaline I really like. I love an all-purpose stone that is also like easy to source, like a quartz or something like that. Selenite is self-cleansing. Um Meaning that like you don't even have to like cleanse the selenite after you're done. It just keeps going. I love selenite anyway. I just think it's so pretty. Um amethyst is my birthstone, and I just feel like it's always looked out for me. So those are probably the big ones. And then if I'm, because my own birthstone has been so impactful for me, if I'm doing protection work on behalf of someone else, I will use their birthstone regardless of what it is, unless their birthstone is like a gajillion dollars, which some of them are. And then I will use like the closest facsimile that I have.
Do you use the birthstone as in like a stone that is associated with their zodiac sign, or as in like what system of birthstone do you use? Just curious.
The month, the sort of just like hyper American way, I think, like just
Okay, cool.
the monthly ones. And I think that is because of my spiritual connection to my grandparents who are gone, who also just always shoved amethyst at me and garnet at my mom and aquamarine at my sister. Not to like give you any insight at all into my family birth charts, but those are firmly just the months. So and that's January, February, March consecutively. And so I think because that is how it was done when I was being raised, I sometimes think when you are raised in something, it is easier to like synthesize it with other stuff that you're working on or working with, as opposed to if I were to just be like, fuck the monthly system, I'm going to use the zodiac stones. Like, I just don't think for me that that would be as impactful because of that history with it.
For sure. Yeah. No, that totally makes
Yeah.
sense. I love black tourmaline because I specifically find it to be a both grounding and protective source. So I'm less like sometimes when you're in a like a protective phase, I feel like paranoia can be really present, right? Or
Mm,
like, I need to be like really paranoid about everything because I feel like, somebody just texted me, so like I need to like make sure everything's fine, but like black tourmaline really does help me ground down and not feel quite that like level of paranoia even though it is still protecting me. So that is one that I do work with. I have a black tourmaline gem essence that I have worked with in the past for that. For that reason, I also really like tourmalinated quartz, which is just like clear
mm,
quartz with shoots of tourmaline in it, because clear quartz can be very like activating for me. It's like I also think about clear quartz as it is, like actually used in like technology and computers and like, other stuff around us. So, I think of it as a very communicative, like I use all of these
mm,
devices that like clear quartz and copper and stuff are used in as communication devices. So I think about it as very communicative. But then the black tourmaline really helps to ground that down and be like, okay, like if it's a tourmalinated quartz, it helps a lot, I think, to kind of tamper some of that energy, or a smoky quartz.
mm.
Um, I also love uh fossilized wood. What's the actual word for that?
Ooh, petrified?
Petrified wood. Yeah, I love petrified wood too cuz it's very, I don't know why, it just the vibes are right and I can't really like say why. It just feels
Mhm.
really right to me. To use petrified wood in this way. I actually keep a petrified wood slice in my car. And I have a friend who lives in Japan who sent me a protection like thing, like charm to like hang from your back mirror. Which I actually don't hang from my back mirror because funnily enough that is actually illegal.
Mhm.
Um
Well, and
and
we
you
live in
can,
an area where that's been real bad for people.
yeah, so I don't like have it hanging. I have it like just in the car, and it has gone with me through like several different cars at this point. Love that. Um, so those are some basics. So another thing that I think about with protection is that it often like pairing cleansing and protection is really, really important. And I think of that specifically as like I want to cleanse the bad shit off of myself before I lock it in with me.
Mhm.
Like
I
like
like
do
that,
a
yeah.
yeah, like do a cleansing and then do your protection work, because if like you don't want to like lock shit in with you. Um I also like, and that's kind of the principle behind my uncrossing bath tea. I have an uncrossing bath tea that has gotten rave reviews, if I do say so myself. And whenever I use it, I feel completely fresh. So
Yeah.
the idea behind the uncrossing bath tea, you are in a quote unquote crossed condition if you have been hexed or cursed or had the evil eye placed on you, or you can also just pick up like unwanted spirit attachments or other kind of like negative energies as you go through your life. And if you get crossed, it is going to act as like a barrier for you as you move forward and try to like move forward in the world. So the uncrossing bath tea that I have developed is really one that will help to wash, like literally physically wash that off of you. And I think that bath teas specifically are so helpful for protective work because it's like you bathe fully in the magic. Like you put your whole body in there, you wash your hair in it, you like do the whole thing. Um, and so when I'm making a bath tea or when I'm making, one of my remedies, I actually have rituals. I have spoken charms that I say over everything. I awaken the herbs as I'm mixing them. It is a ritualized experience for me, that I then pass on to you. So you can just like use the tea and not have to like do a lot. Anyway, that's like a little look into my Nordic folk magic practice, which is very like secretive and cagey about what exactly I do. So the uncrossing bath tea is very helpful. I also so I've hinted about this a lot this season, and we will probably talk more about paranormal stuff like throughout the entirety of this podcast. I grew up in a deeply haunted town. Like spooky, scary. Like when I was initiated into a coven as a teen, we had to have somebody whose entire job was to maintain the wards because doing magic at all attracted things
Mhm.
to us. And that's true. But like when the land is especially angry as it was where I grew up, that is a challenge, for sure. So protection is also making sure that you have a good protective system from whenever you are doing magic. I went through a phase for several years where I kind of stopped casting full circles before I um did any magic. I would if it was like a bigger ritual, but I wouldn't if it was a smaller ritual. And that was when I was like really exploring folk magic and really exploring um some like traditions that were like not the one that I was initially taught when I was learning magic. And now I've come back to doing full circles when I do things. I can do them very quickly. Because I have that training and that background. Um so what is so special about casting a circle is that you are simultaneously cleansing the space that you are in, readying your body for ritual, raising the energy, and creating a protection around yourself, like as you are going through this ritual. And that's why the Wiccan circle works, frankly.
Mhm.
And I'm saying Wiccan because like there are many different ways of casting a circle, and
Yeah.
that is the one that I have the most experience with. Treading the mill also works very well. There are a lot of different methods that you can use to do this. So the way that I was taught to cast a protective circle upon doing magic, was to like physically sweep or clear the area. And this also includes burning herbs or incense that is intended for cleansing.
Mhm.
So you clear the ritual area, then you ground your own energy. So you are, what that means is you are like feeling your feet on the ground, you are putting your arms on the ground, you are like feeling the energy of the earth and like kind of
Mhm.
pulling that into your body and like allowing yourself to be more um to be grounded. Then call the corners. If you're not doing a Wiccan circle, you don't need to do this in quite the same way. This is elemental. So, like air, fire, water, earth. I also will often say like a little something that will connect that element and that element's power into the working that I'm planning on doing when I'm doing a circle. And that sort of like helps to charge the area for you. Another thing that is very common in at least in Nordic folk magic, and I believe it's common in other forms of folk magic as well, is there's a reason that you are calling to the east, south, west, and north when you are doing it. And it is because you are saying, like, this is the place, this right here is the sacred place where I am doing my magic. I am casting this magic at this crossroads of these four directions. And I'm calling in the protective energy of these areas or these winds. In Nordic, it's very much like the north wind, the south wind, the east
Mhm.
wind, the west wind. Very like air kind of oriented, right?
Mhm.
Um, and so then that also like helps you to pull up and like bring forward your own power as you are casting the circle. Wow, I did not intend to talk about casting a circle. But
That is okay. I think it is important for people to know, and a lot of people want to know, like, what is it? I will say I do a very scaled down version where I don't necessarily call the corners, and there's a lot of different thoughts on calling the corners, and we can even see witches like in their lifetime changing. Like I think Ray Buckland comes to mind, who in the beginning was like, do not call the corners. That is not good. Don't do it. And then later in his life he was like, okay, here's how you call corners. So like we see those evolutions. I think for me, I love the way you explained it. And I think I will be using that moving forward. But I think for me, it felt arbitrary. I don't know. But I do cast a circle. I do cleanse the space first. I do just imagine a protective circle around me and the space I'm in. And I'll do some like ritual to ensure that. In terms of in a spell, that is sort of what I do. Yeah. A quick clarification that, or not even clarification, but I guess a question I have that viewers or listeners might have as well. I am really bad about cleansing. And the reason I am kind of bad about doing it spiritually is because I think I have felt superstitious or too anxious about like washing off things I don't want to wash off, like my prosperity magic, my like ability magic, like whatever. So, how do you do that without doing that? I guess is my question.
so for a very thorough cleansing, so like if you're going to use my own crossing bath tea, for example, which is a very like that is for like if you are fucking hexed and you need to get that off of you, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I also just will use it sometimes kind of randomly because sometimes I don't know like what I've
Mm-hmm.
stepped in. And it's important to kind of keep those boundaries or not boundaries, to keep yourself fresh, I guess. Fresh and clean. So if you're doing a big cleansing, one thing that I will say is that you could always like call in those good things to you. So, say you have a spirit that is a guardian spirit or a spirit that you really love to work with who often is like just hanging out around your body or like in your, like connected in some way. You can say, hey, spirit, like, name them or like whatever you've used. Um, if you want to maintain relationship, come back, you know or if you are have like an abundance magic or a glamour or something like that, then just like kind of like reapply it. So I know just from like working in circles with many many different witches, I know a lot of witches when they're like getting a magical tool that they maybe haven't worked with in a while, they'll like tap it. I'm also thinking about like phasecraft magic, who's also a Neapolitan witch, who will like knock on their tarot deck at the beginning of readings, like before shuffling. It's sort of a similar thing, but energetically.
Okay.
It's like, oh, hey, that glamour magic, like, come back to me. Or you can just reapply as
Yeah.
well. Especially with glamour magics, those are like a thing that you will want to, um, continuously reapply anyway.
Well, and I was thinking about my ongoing like prosperity work and things like that, that too, that I was like, well, I don't want to like wash off any, I guess, incoming or unrealized effects of that. Cause I know the magic a lot of times, especially in chaos magic, is like you do the magic and then like you
You
go about your
wait.
life. Yeah. But I'm specifically thinking about like I think what I've been anxious about is like washing off something that hasn't like materialized yet or like
I have never had that experience with cleansing.
great.
If
Like to be clear, I haven't either. It's just something that because I have been doing this work for 22 years, and it's still something that I am like will a cleansing actually hurt the ongoing work I'm doing? Like if I'm asking that 22 years in, other people probably are too. And beginners
for sure.
certainly are.
Oh,
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. Another thing that I like to think about it is that like cleansing is not necessarily like, making you a black hole of nothingness
that's fair.
energetically. It is what it is doing is it is also removing the barriers that the unfulfilled magic that you have been doing is running against. So like think about it as like, you know, maybe some of the energetic gunk that you have picked up over the year or however long it has been since you cast the spell is like slowing down the realization of the results from your spell. And so you
Mm,
are getting rid of any barriers. That's also part of why I call it uncrossing, or like why I think uncrossing is such a good like word, even though like we're kind of moving beyond what uncrossing is. But like when I learned about uncrossing and like kind of like got into and learned more about those rituals, you know, and I learned that terminology from specifically hoodoo, I should say, as well. Hoodoo practitioners
hmm.
talking very openly about it, so like it's not closed.
Yeah,
Um, but it's you are taking things out of your way, essentially.
I really like that
Um,
actually. Thank you.
yeah.
Also, really like the idea of uncrossing because if we're talking about accidental evil eye or something like that, one thing that I have encountered a lot as a traumatized person is like sometimes the jinx or the crossing is coming from inside the house. Like, oh, sometimes it is my inner saboteur. It is that part of me that does not think I'll be anything but like a high school dropout, essentially, because I finished an adult ed, that doesn't think I'll be anything but that, and also like grew up feeling so lonely and so misunderstood by like peers and authority figures alike, with very few exceptions. But those people are still in my life and I love them a lot. But I think so for and it's like you can't overcome that without significant like therapeutic and then spiritual, whatever your spirituality is, intervention, in my opinion. And so I still struggle with that. I still struggle with that inner saboteur. And what you will learn is the more that you sort of like learn about the world is that your own inner saboteur will use new ways to cross you and use new ways to mess with you. So an example that I always think about is prosperity magic because we moved a lot because my mom couldn't necessarily pay bills or rent. And I also was in a trailer park for a long time. And I very often feel like when I started learning money magic, the inner saboteur was like, you actually can't make money because you are this. You were born in these circumstances and you are
Mm,
this. But then when I started doing a lot of my own unlearning, but I had learned about systemic things, the inner saboteur was like, the system is designed against you. And that is true. And it's good to know, but it can also be a source of power. You can learn to be very crafty and really resourceful and really resilient, which is what I ended up doing. Um, but then I think several years ago, I started feeling like, well, why should I have this money and other people in my community don't? And it actually
ugh,
took, it's funny
yes.
because, yeah, she came up last time in our glamour magic chat, but the money witch, I read her money magic book, and the quote that always sticks with me, and I think I'm paraphrasing, but is in it, she's like, broke witches can't help the movement. And I was like, oh, like that was like a lightning bulb moment for me. I was like, oh, so like if I, especially too, as like someone who strives very hard to be an ally or an accomplice, so much of what BIPOC, especially communities, need is literally money. And so if I don't have any, and so I say all of this to say that the uncrossing and stuff, it can like also really help you have those light bulb moments and undo your own like inner bullshit, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are many different ways of doing like kind of, you can think about it as uncrossing work. There are a lot of different ways of doing that. But I always, always, always pair cleansing with protection because you don't want to, like, if the sabotage is coming from inside the house, you don't want to lock it in the house. You want to get
Nope.
it out of the house.
Yeah.
So another thing, like some witches will have this, idea that like when you are, for example, smoke cleansing your home, you need to open a window so that like the bad energy can escape. I have had, um varying results on that. So, take that as you will. If you're smoke cleansing the house, like the kind of idea is that like, the smoke is catching the negative energy and taking it out. So that is why the like cracking a window or something like that is important. I also love a good floor wash as well for this kind of thing because a floor wash is like literally cleansing the floor. Um I actually like I mixed up I have like my, preferred like floor wash for cleansing and protection recipe. I made like essentially like a tincture of it and I put it in with my Swiffer water. And so every time I just like clean the floors, like I'm also doing a floor wash, which is really
Love
nice.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. Just like
I do
super
similar
practical.
things. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I do similar things. I love that. One thing I want to talk about that is like an older sort of more, whether you call it folk craft or traditional witchcraft or whatever, sort of like these older styles of protective magic a lot of times are about like puppets and door charms and things like that. And so I know we're both big door charm people. I feel like when I try to explain to people how I do charms for the door, I basically end up saying like, you put stuff together and then you put it above the door. So like in your slightly more experienced teacher explanations, how would you describe it to people?
So, this is awesome. I'm glad that you brought up door magic, because I forget that I do it a lot.
Mm.
Doors
Well,
and
and it's like one
windows.
of my main forms too. It's just when I have a hard time like telling other people
Explaining.
about.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
essentially, like, you can think of the door and the window as like a liminal space. So when you are entering through a door, entering through a window, like you are in the space between your home sanctuary and the outside. And so it is a liminal spaces in general are often kind of thought of as very powerful um places to do magic, right? So it's how I believe it's actually in Celtic tradition where like doing magic on the beach because it's not the sea or the land, right?
Yeah.
Those kinds of liminal spaces. And so your doorway, your threshold is not the inside or the outside. So there's a liminality to that. Um, and so essentially what I do, and I do like a charm or something to hang over the door, is I bring together my, materia and I like awaken them and I like arrange them all prettily. And then um as I hang it above the door, I might say something or I might, just hang it with purpose for, like this will help to protect the home, kind of thing. Yeah, it feels very like simple to just like say it like that, but I think sometimes people like to hear the theory, like the why, like why do we do door charms? Another thing I do because I do make a protection oil is I will also just like make my protection oil and then I will anoint my doors and windows with the protection oil. That's another really good way of just like kind of sealing in your sanctuary, your home.
Yeah. So yeah, now hopefully you all have a lot of ideas for like little sort of daily, or I think in Siri's case it's more like weekly and monthly things. And I think for door charms, both of us, it's like, oh, we'll make new ones together at the holidays, or when we are like changing our space or cleansing it in some way, we'll make new ones. It's definitely not daily though. I don't have the kind of time budget where I can make a charm every day and move it somewhere.
Lord no. Lord no. I
Yeah.
feel like one of the happy thing, what am I saying? Siri. One of the nice things about door charms and window charms is they're sort of like, I don't want to say like set it and forget it, but like they like you can set them up and like you're good for a good long while.
Hmm.
Um
Well, and you'll feel it when it goes stale. And again, we never want to be scary. It going stale doesn't feel scary. It just feels like there is no longer magic above that doorway.
yeah.
That's all that will happen is you won't feel the magic itself. And so it's time to re-up.
Yeah, and that can look like either making a fully new charm or just like, re-enchanting the charm that you've already made.
Mm-hmm. I want to get into some stickier stuff with sort of these last few minutes. Which is specifically when we have to go on magical defense. So when we are doing protection magic, we sort of talked about going on protection offense, which is just like, no harm, come to me, please. I always think of just like an aura or a bubble, like pushing bad things out until it just like scatters. Um, is sort of how I think about the stuff we've been talking about. Just like me walking through the world like Bubble Boy, like love that for me. And so uh but specifically too, I think Siri and I have both been hexed or cursed. um I'm pretty sure I've been jinxed, but that's harder to prove because I'm a bit of a dork and a klutz anyway. So like maybe I was jinxed, maybe I just hit my head on six things that day because I'm an idiot. But I and to be clear, the difference is like a jinx will just like annoy the shit out of you, but a hex or a curse is specifically meant to like limit you or hurt you in a way. Um and I am not a jinxer just because I don't know what other people's capacities are, but I will. And also, it feels less protective and more like you're just being a dick. And if you want to and some people deserve a jinx, I want to be 1000% clear. I just don't think that I'm the person to do it. um, because I'm always like, well, what will make this person feel jinxed? Because I will hit my head 6 times in a day and be like, that's minorly annoying. And could have gone without that, but I'm fine. So, but then when we're talking about hexes or curses, we're talking about the bigger, sort of like meatier stuff. And both are more common than people think or want to acknowledge. And those are intentional, not like some of the other stuff we've been talking about. All of that to say, how do we do our protective magic when like magically the worst has happened? And so I always think of the first time Siri and I lived together. They had a weird work situation and they were staying half of the time in my house and half of the time in Duluth or something like that. And so it's just a nutso time for Siri, but
That was really truly one of the
yeah,
most chaotic and worst times of my life.
yeah, for sure. Well, and we did some of this stuff, but that's neither here nor there. So, when Siri was living with me, I had a nightmare about someone that I used to be friends with who is in jail. And then I had a nightmare about someone that I do not have a good relationship with, but is very good at spotting magical fuckery, or at least was at the time. Um, and so I knew something was wrong and I felt just like really creeped out, like people were watching me. And I went to Siri and my queer platonic partner and I was like, Pretty sure I've been hexed for the first time in like a decade. Do not love this for me. What can we do? And it turned out to be a bunch of different stuff. So, one thing a hex absolutely can do when you are not protecting yourself and your magic well, ahem, Cassandra, myself,
Me
is
too,
it will,
frankly.
yeah, it will make all of your little careless errors amplify to the nth degree. And so I had like spirits and fae that were not well intended, that were just like, them and their energy was just like festering. And like there was a mirror we had to cleanse. There was like an entire room that had some like really bad energy hotspots we had to sort of cleanse and get rid of. All of this stuff happened. And so I guess what I want to say is like this does happen. And so, we also don't, there is also an issue of magical psychosis. So like sometimes people just suck and you haven't been hexed and other people are using their free will to be assholes. Um Hopefully protecting yourself from that or reflecting it back will still help you. Like it will still, like, reflecting back, like return to sender stuff, if truly no one is intending you harm, it will not do anything except put that bad luck, like, again, just sort of like out into the ether and to like hopefully dissipate. And so it just sort of like pushes it away. But yeah, I just remember that time. And so we did a return to sender because it felt like an extreme situation. I'll be honest, I don't know that the return to sender did anything, but it sure did make my life better. And so, and again, I think it's because the specific curse or hex ended up just amplifying the times where I've been lazy or the times where I have been careless or thoughtless. Um,
The
More
other
so
thing I
than
want to
anything else.
Yeah, and the other thing I want to say about that too with return to sender work and that kind of thing, like sometimes when you have been hexed, that energy needs to go somewhere.
Yeah.
And, you know, I may not actively hex or curse someone, but I sure as hell will send their shit back to them.
Yes. And that works whether it's spiritual or mundane.
Yeah. So that's another reason why, you can think about your own ethics around return to sender. Like, I'm not saying you should or shouldn't do anything. There are ways of redirecting that energy into something that wouldn't, necessarily harm someone else, although you definitely don't want to give that object to someone. Um, but yeah, so there are ways of redirecting that energy without returning to sender, but like if they started it, like I'm going to send it back. I'm not going to add, but I'm going to send it back.
Well, and I will say too that something that works really well for that, for the like redirecting it, is we've also done sweetener spells for people or situations.
Yes.
And those are things I usually think of in respect to, say, like a court case or something like that. Like you want to make the judge sympathetic. You want to make, if there's a jury involved, you want to make them sympathetic. I use it a lot for institutions when I like need to make sure that my healthcare is not going to get cut off, things like that. Um and again, that kind of spell and protection magic, like, and I also think protection magic is harder for me because I do like to see a tangible, like, oh, I manifested this thing. And if you're doing protection work well and enough of it, you're like just not going to notice that it's working because things will just not be crappy. And that's
Yeah.
like a weird intangible thing that I just struggle with. So, yeah, so don't be like me, really, is the point there. But the sweetener spell is sort of a really good. And so to do that, a lot of times it's as simple as like, I mean, it depends on what your allies are, right? That's, if you take nothing else from a whole season of this podcast, it should be that like everything is about your relationship with your allies, spiritually. And so for me, honey is a big one, as is maple syrup, especially now that I live in Minnesota. Maple syrup was one of the first sort of like crossovers into like, I haven't seen this in a book, but a lot of maple syrup is made and bottled here, and a lot of it is made and bottled very, very close to us in Canada. And so it works as well for me in Minnesota as honey spells did when I was learning witchcraft in the South. And so, depending on what you are needing, and remember, like Siri has said a couple times throughout the season, magic works in layers, which even means doing the same thing every day, like literally eating a teaspoon of honey and saying, may this honey soften not only me, but like your target, like may it make my heart softer as well as this judge or this boss or whatever. And I think that that is a really effective way to redirect that energy. I've also done like I wish I could remember components because I like to give people the nitty gritty on this podcast. Um, but especially like former spells that are just no longer relevant. But I've also done like a get a life spell if I feel like someone is just too obsessed with me, and I'm like, you need to be putting your energy literally anywhere else, friend. Like, I, I
Yeah,
like
that's
literally get a
hilarious.
life. Yeah.
That is
Um.
hilarious. I love that.
I wish I could tell you what I did, but it was literally like 15 years ago. And I just remember, but I remember I have like a visceral memory of like writing out in my grimoire, like, get a life spell. um,
I also you have a really good I don't know if you designed it yourself or if you found a recipe for this, but like you have a really good hit the road jack powder.
Manny did that actually, my queer platonic partner. And we did get
Yeah.
it from a book about the Morrigan by Stephanie Woodfield. I wish I could remember which book of hers it was, but it is directly from that.
Okay. Yeah. And that's another thing too, like with components, like for example, hyssop is very often used in protective and cleansing magic and is, a key ingredient in my uncrossing bath tea. Hyssop has a really long tradition of being utilized in this way. So sometimes when you're reading, spells, or, you're learning more about magic and like things keep jumping out at you, I was like, oh, this is a recurring ingredient for this. Um, then sometimes like just listen to that. Like you don't always have to rewrite the wheel. Because that plant spirit is so attuned to this kind of work. So
Yeah.
you might as well get to know them, right? Like if this is a recurring issue for you, you might as well get to know Hyssop.
I agree. And I also think that I think if people, and this is sort of a whole different podcast episode, as we often say 17 times an episode here at
Yeah.
Chaos and Cunning, but I think a way that I recommend a lot of people start is picking one or two or three ingredients or correspondences that a lot of people or books would define as all purpose, or that you just notice have different purposes and different stuff, and just see how it works with you. Um an example, and unfortunately Siri is allergic to this, but it is one of my strongest allies, but in sort of modern day witch culture, we almost always see cinnamon for prosperity and abundance. And in a lot of ways, this makes a lot of sense because this is one of the spices that like white people colonized the whole world for, was to like have an abundance of it and stuff, and to be able to like have that and make more and everything else. Like it is one of like those core spices that we think about when we think about why colonizers are terrible and the worst. Like that was one of the quote unquote reasons. And so it makes sense for abundance and prosperity as well as luxury. In other cultures, like the cultures that were colonized, a lot of times because it is a bark, it is actually considered protective. It is actually considered cleansing. And those are wildly different. And a lot of times I've seen it in recipes for like hexes and things like that. And so again, it doesn't have to be cinnamon, but like go through some of your books, some of your correspondence list, etc. Pick two or three things that you feel really drawn to or that you just really like I use daily coffee spells, which we'll talk about in a minute, for everything, because coffee is also extremely all purpose magically. What I will say is I am not from the cultures that needed to use cinnamon protectively, so it works better for me in abundance work. But had I not taken the time to get to know it, I wouldn't know that. And so on the contrary, we have coffee, which like I am a coffee fiend. My dad is a coffee fiend. His dad was a coffee fiend. I'm pretty sure it goes like all the way back to the discovery of coffee. And as far as my dad can see in like writings of the family and stuff, that is like definitively true. And even to hear my late grandfather talk at the time, he was like, "Oh yeah, every snow loves coffee." Like I and so to me, it is like a big ancestral practice and connection. I think it is because of that um that coffee itself, if I need some oomph to a money spell or a manifestation spell of any sort, I'll drink a coffee about it. If I need extra protective work, I'll drink a coffee about it. Like, and obviously I'm doctoring them a little to meet those needs more. And so coffee to me was an ingredient that did reveal itself to be all purpose, but because of that, coffee wants to know my intentions before I do a working. um because the coffee is like, I could do a lot of things right now, friend. What would you like to see? If you're trying to figure out what protection magic is going to work for you, go back to the root of like, okay, why is this listed so many different ways? Like try to find the why, which I think is just good witchcraft research and or like mindset in general. And then work with it yourself to see what comes to you or speaks to you. So that's sort of the way to
Absolutely.
get started if you know nothing about protection magic. I would actually start with all purpose stuff because I also think that protection spirits are honestly pretty eager to work with us a lot of the time.
Yeah, yeah. I think that protective spirits, like, they want a job. It helps them to like help us, right? Like, and talk to your spirits like it's different for everyone, obviously, but like, yeah, I think that that is one of the biggest rules of thumb for me. So,
Yeah.
you've already talked a lot about coffee, and I know that we're going to be talking a little bit more about that as we segue into our weekly chaos and cunning works.
I love it. I'm excited. So my chaos magic this week. There are some chaos, I almost want to say like divination or energy reading techniques that again, no tools, like it's literally just you taking the time, tuning in and sort of seeing what's going on around you. And a lot of the way I utilize this as like do I even need protective magic? Like that's the divination part, is a lot of times I will do this like as soon as I go into a space where I'm not sure what the vibes are. Or I'm not sure like what I'm getting myself into. And again, that's everything we've talked about. That's protection from my own inner saboteur that is very inclined to be like, well, no one here is going to like me. And that is also but it also is protective because like if you get back in that reading that like something or someone is sus, you know to avoid that or to avoid them. And so yeah, it's all of those things. And then it also like sometimes even just seeing the energy will also reveal like what you can do about it or how you can shift or redirect it to make it a positive experience, not just for you but for everyone. Like all of my magic is deeply aimed at making the whole world a better place, and I think if you go somewhere and there's a lot of animosity, redirecting that towards like understanding or even having hard conversations is as or more protective than just straight up throwing your walls up.
Hmm.
So that's something I've been doing this week, is playing with that. The cunning work I've been doing is probably working with the coffee spirits in the morning, specifically for protective magic. There's like a folk spell that's in a bunch of books. Again, I don't actually have the root of where this one comes from, and it might just be made up by someone, but so is everything. So that is okay. That's another belief I hold here at Chaos and Cunning, is that everything is made up. Life is about making meaning, not finding it.
Exactly. I agree.
And so it's a coffee stirring spell. And so you stir the coffee and creamer or whatever you put in it towards you to like bring good things to you. And then you stir away from you to move things, like move bad things away from you. And you're explicit when you say it, but it does not have to be a long drawn out, like 10 stanza incantation. And it frankly should not be, because coffee being a stimulant like works quickly. That's like a thing that it does. And so you can just do a couple times whatever is magical, like with this stir I push all bad shit away from me today, and then with this stir towards me I bring all of the juice and love that life has to offer me towards me. So
I
that's
love
been
that
my
one.
cunning work this week. Yeah.
I love that one. So my chaos work right now has
I'm so
been
excited to hear about this.
I am actually going to tell you more about it off recording because I am still a little tiny bit embarrassed, but whatever. So I am making some cursed crafts. I am very specifically making things that look very creepy, that I can carry on my person. Um, and uh essentially like they'll be good luck charms for me, but bad luck charms for people who want to mess with me.
I love that. That is a kind of protection magic we did not bring up, but that is something that I do quite a bit.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's like, "Oh, if you're gonna like, be messing with me or, you don't like my energy or whatever, like that's fine, but as soon as you start actively like being shitty to me, like bad luck." So yeah, I'm doing that and I'm doing it with like kind of puppets or dolls too. So like I'm gonna get a little doll that I can like hang on my bag and like
I
do
love
that
it.
because that's in vogue right now. But it's going to be a homemade item. I'm getting freaky with sewing machines, essentially.
I love that.
And yeah, so that's really exciting. And then in terms of cunning, so I will be tabling for lore at Pagan Pride, which is this coming Saturday as of recording. So I need to just like mix a bunch of my remedies and recipes. I have been testing and perfecting my dream my dream walker tea, which is a bath tea that is to be utilized like right before bed to both help you sleep but also help your dreams be clarifying or help with dream divination work. I don't need to lucid dream every night. I don't need to get prophetic dreams every night. Sometimes I just want like my weird little creepy dreams, but sometimes I very specifically do want help and assistance and clarity from my dreams. So utilizing a bath tea for that I think will
Agreed.
be really nice.
Absolutely. Yay. Well, thank you all for joining us again for our fifth episode. We're taking a little bit of a season break, but support us on Patreon because we'll be doing some mini episodes there specifically about folklore that maybe you haven't heard about elsewhere that fascinates either Siri or myself or both. So if you want to know what kangaroos and lake monsters have in common, support us on Patreon. Well, thank you
All
all
right.
so much, and thank you, Siri. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye. All right, everybody, that is our show for today. Thank you for listening.
Now it's time for you to go be the chaos you want to see in the world.
And create the cunning you dream of. Bye.